Good morning and happy Sunday, everybody. Pastor Brian here. We're still winding down this Epiphany series. We've got say, another week or so, another week or two in this series before we finally get to the season of Lent, and we'll have something entirely new for you guys then. But for now, we're continuing to discover new things. We're continuing to ask questions and give ourselves permission to ask questions. And one of the questions that we're going to be taking a look at today seems like a relatively easy question to answer, but we're going to explore it regardless of what you think about it. And the question we have before us today is Christianity easy? Right? Another way that you could phrase that is being a Christian easy? Right? This is a question that pops up throughout church history, believe it or not. The answer is known, and it's an answer that a lot of Christians unfortunately tend to ignore. See, there's a lot of different aspects and elements to Christianity. The one that most people focus on, or at least a lot of Christians focus on, is the idea of salvation. The idea that Jesus came into this world to save us from the clutches of sin and death, to give us the opportunity for new life by water and the Spirit through his death and resurrection. Having said that, there is a train of belief that does pop in from time to time with the idea that as long as you say yes to Jesus, as long as you're a follower, as long as you're baptized, that's it. You're on easy street. That's all there is to it. Right? As long as you have faith, then you're saved. And while that certainly is an important component of Christianity, that's not the whole story. So let's take a look at what the Bible has to say about that. To begin with this, we're going to actually go to the story of somebody else who was sent before us so that we could find salvation. A story of somebody who was sent into Egypt so that he could end up in the long run saving his family. And I'm talking, of course, about a man named Joseph. You might be familiar with Joseph, whether you've read the Bible already, or whether you've seen Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, that musical's about him, or what is it, Prince? It's not Prince of Joseph. There's a cartoon movie about Joseph too, if I remember correctly. I think it's from the same company that did Prince of Egypt. Joseph is one of those stories. It's one of the last stories, if not the last story, in the book of Genesis, and it's a fantastic story. It's a story about a man who has 12 sons, and his second youngest son is named Joseph. And because this son was born to his favorite wife, because this man had multiple wives, because at this time there really wasn't anything wrong with that in the Bible, he doted upon this son. While the older brothers of Joseph were tasked with doing work and going outdoors and hunting and farming and all of this stuff, Joseph was a homebody. Joseph was somebody who was kind of considered delicate. He was somebody who was more, he had more strength in his mind than he did perhaps in his body. He liked the indoors. He was almost more of an introvert in today's understanding. His father dotes on him, gives him this beautiful coat, and it causes all of his older brothers to get really upset. And they concoct a plan to kill Joseph. So they go out and they're doing their shepherd work. They're herding sheep or goats or whatever it is they're herding. And somebody, Joseph's mom or his dad or somebody says, "Hey, why don't you go out to your brothers? We've got a message for them." And he says, "Okay, well, where are they?" They say they're out in the fields. So he goes out in the fields, and eventually he finds his brothers, and his brothers beat him up and throw him down in a pit. And before they're going to kill him, the oldest brother, I believe his name's Reuben, he says, "Let's not kill him. Instead, let's just leave him down there. We'll let everybody at home get worried, then we'll come back, and then we'll get prestige when we rescue him." And as they're kind of debating on what they're supposed to do, this individual walks by, and they decide, why not just sell Joseph to this guy as a slave? And they do. They sell Joseph. Joseph is taken to Egypt. Quickly, he becomes known for interpreting dreams that nobody else can understand. It's this gift that God has given him. He can take a dream and tell you exactly what it means, and sometimes the dreams are good, and sometimes the dreams aren't great. But he's the only person who can interpret Pharaoh's dreams, right? Meanwhile, keep in mind, he has been sold and betrayed by his own family, his big brothers, right? Um, Family dynamics are difficult enough as it is, but I mean, if you are a younger sibling, imagine how you would feel if your older siblings decided to do something like this to you, right? It's not going to feel great. Joseph's too busy in Egypt to really be processing this. At least the Bible doesn't talk about him thinking about it too much, but I like to imagine that over the years that he's in Egypt, he is thinking about it and processing it and trying to figure out what it all means. And meanwhile, he's interpreting dreams, he's climbing the social hierarchy. Eventually, he becomes the second greatest and most powerful person in all the land of Egypt, just below Pharaoh. He's put in charge of basically running the entire country for Pharaoh. And he has a dream, or the Pharaoh has a dream that he asks Joseph to interpret, and Joseph interprets it and says, well, there's going to be, 7 years of plenty or something like that, and for 7 years we're going to have bountiful harvests, but then for the next 7 years there's going to be famine. So what we need to do, Pharaoh, is we need to stock up in those 7 years. That way, when the famine hits, we'll be okay, and anybody who comes to us, we can make a profit off of if they need food. And Pharaoh says, great idea, Joseph, go and do that. You're in charge. Joseph does that. Famine hits. Famine hits Joseph's old family. Their father sends the brothers to Egypt, and they encounter a man who they don't know is Joseph, but it is their brother Joseph. He recognizes them. He does not let on immediately that it is him. Instead, he speaks only Egyptian and talks to them through a translator to try and get information about why they're here. He finds out that the famine is hard in their land. He starts messing with them a little bit. Right? He says, well, you said you have this many brothers. Where's the other brother? And they say, well, he's back with his dad. Well, you're lying to me about this. I don't believe you. Bring your brother here, and we'll see if you're telling the truth. They go, bring the brother back. Joseph basically takes the brother, holds him hostage. It's his youngest brother, Benjamin, and says, you have betrayed me. He just keeps messing with him, right? Eventually, he can't hold it in anymore. Reuben, his oldest brother, gives this great speech about the regret that he has in regards to what he did to their other brother Joseph, who he doesn't know he's talking to. Talks about how the impact of their actions really hadn't hit them until this moment when they're facing losing another brother, and Joseph can't keep up the charade anymore. And he drops all pretenses. He says, it's me, it's Joseph. I want you to know I'm not holding it against you. Don't worry about it, right? You didn't put me here. God put me here. Joseph is taking power onto him. He's putting the situation in his terms, in his understanding. He's reinterpreting the past in a way that allows him to move forward. So instead of being bitter, instead of laying the blame on his brothers and continually holding that grudge, he says, it wasn't you. This was part of, for lack of a better term, this was part of God's plan for me. He wanted me to come here so that I could save you guys later on. Now go get everybody, bring them back. We've got a place for you guys to live, and you get fat and happy. It'll be amazing, right? It's worth pointing out that as amazing as that story is, Joseph's not a Christian, right? Joseph is not even technically Jewish. Right? Judaism's not even really a religion yet in the Bible. He is a descendant of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, right? And so he does have this covenant in his family between him and God, but there is no religious statutes at this point, or at least not a lot of them. They can't very well call themselves Jewish. They can barely call themselves Israelites at this time, though Joseph's dad is named Israel, and all of their descendants will eventually become known as the Israelites or the descendants of Israel. But Joseph reveals to us what the power that Christianity can have in people's lives. Because Christianity, if you want to get it really down to a very basic understanding, an understanding that's maybe a little bit more mainline, maybe not as, religious in nature, Christianity is a framework. It's a lens. It's a way for us to look around at the world around us and to reinterpret it just like Joseph reinterprets his past. It allows us to look at our pasts and to see, God at work in our lives, but it also allows us to determine the actions that we are going to be taking in the present, and it gives us hope for the future, right? We're striving toward something. Is Christianity easy? To get to the answer to that question today, we're going to be actually hearing from the Gospel of Luke. I want you to keep Joseph in mind, because Joseph kind of serves as the pretense for what it means to take power back, right? Joseph is kind of serving as this framework of what it looks like when you change the narrative yourself so that you then have the power and the control in the situation. Remember, Joseph said, it wasn't you guys, God did this. He clears them of the blame. He clears his brothers of the blame. Jesus, as he continues his sermon on the plain in Luke chapter 6, he's going to start saying a lot of things that sound very similar to what Joseph does in the book of Genesis. So he says this. He says, I say to you who are willing to hear, and this is starting in chapter 6, verse 17, or verse 27, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, give them the other cheek as well. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt either. Give to everyone who asks, and don't demand your things back from those who take them. Treat people the same way you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, why should you be commended? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, why should you be commended? Even sinners do that. If you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, why should you be commended? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be paid back in full. Instead, love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting nothing in return. If you do, you'll have great reward. You'll be acting the way the children of the Most High act, for he is kind to ungrateful and wicked people. Be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Later on in the Bible, there's a little document that's called James. And James has caused a lot of controversy over the course of church history, because James, from that document is where we get a phrase that maybe you've heard whether you're a Christian or not, called faith without works is dead. Now this leads to some misunderstanding over the course of Christian history, leads to this idea that if you want to be saved, you have to put in the work. Because even if you're a follower of Jesus, you're not going to be saved unless you do work. And that line of thinking can be problematic, right? Because it means that salvation's conditional on the effort that you put in. And what we see when we look at the entirety of the New Testament is that it's not through the works that you do, rather the works come out of the faith that you have. The works, the things that we do, are a way to say thank you for what God has done for us. Now, interestingly enough, the words you just heard me read from Jesus are some of the words that even Bible literalists, people who consider themselves to be people who believe that every line in the Bible is 100% true and accurate and should be adhered to 100%, even they will say, well, Jesus didn't really mean that. And the reason is because they think it makes them weak. Why would Jesus want his followers to be weak? Aren't we supposed to be soldiers of the cross? Aren't we supposed to be the ones leading the charge into battle? Aren't we supposed to be the foot soldiers on the ground? If somebody offends us and offends our sensibilities, shouldn't we fight back? And what they encounter when they get to this passage is Jesus saying, no. He's not saying be a doormat. He's saying, I'm telling you to do these things because in doing these things, you take control of the narrative. Right? Jesus is revealing to us what it means to be a Christian. He says, love your enemies. It is not difficult at all to love the people who are easy to love. It is extremely difficult to love people that you don't agree with. It is extremely difficult to love people that you might call enemy. Right? Now, liking and loving are not the same thing. Loving essentially kind of means you hope the best for them, right? You don't have to like them necessarily, but you do have to love them. You have to treat them as you would want to be treated. It's that old golden rule that pops up in religions from around the world, right? He says, do good to those who hate you. Actively do good to the people that hate you. right? What does that look like when you? I remember there was a kid in school when I was in high school, in middle school through high school. He was a bully. He didn't really bully me too much per se, but I knew a lot of the kids that he would bully, and nobody ever called him out on that, for the most part, right? And nobody would ever really get in his way. Eventually, he just became ignored, and then he became this attention-seeking kid, and then he just kind of faded. The whole situation is not great. But I wonder what would have happened if any of us back in those days would have actively tried to do good for him. I mean, we didn't know anything about his family situation. We didn't know anything about what he was going through outside of school. All we knew was that when he came to school, he was a jerk. Doing good to people who hate you, it's something to think about, but it's also something that's very hard to do. Blessing those who curse you. Somebody curses at you or wishes you ill will, for you to turn around and say, I hope the best for you in the future. It takes a lot. It's hard to do. To pray for those who mistreat you, that's difficult. If someone slaps you on the cheek, here we go, turn the other cheek. What does that mean? It means if somebody is slapping you, right? If somebody assaults you or insults you, right? By allowing that to happen and then actively choosing to turn that other cheek, that's not being weak. That's changing the narrative. That's taking control. That's letting the person who slapped you know that you're fine with that that's not going to get to you, that there is more to what's going on here, that you're in control, right? If somebody forces you to walk a mile, walk another mile, right? Continue to walk with them. Take control of the situation. If somebody takes your coat, give them your shirt too. Take control of the situation. Is Christianity easy? No. Christianity is not supposed to be easy. And if you think Christianity is easy, if you think that all you have to do is be baptized and you're good, I'm sorry, but you need to go back and read your Bible again, or maybe for the first time. Because Christianity is not just about the salvation. It's about saying thank you for the salvation through the things that we do, the things that we say, through the way that we live our lives. And if you're not saying thank you to God, well, there's a whole bunch of stories in the Bible about what happens when you don't say thank you to God. Is it easy to be Christian? No. Because when you put on the mantle of Christianity, you are making a covenant between you and God and whoever else is in your community, that you are going to be the one changing the narrative, that you are going to be the one that is taking control in your life, in your situation, that you know that God is in control of all things, but that you are not going to let the world beat you down anymore, that you're going to be the one dictating what's going on, that you're going to be the one, like Joseph, who has to change the way you view the world. Christianity, at the end of the day, yes, it's about loving God, it's about loving your neighbor, but it's also about loving yourself too. It's about changing your life for the better, letting God change your life for the better. It's about seeing all the negativity in the world and saying, you know what, I'm going to reframe that narrative. I'm going to put the power back into my hands. I'm going to change the narrative, and I'm going to find ways to make good come from this with God's help. I am going to listen to God. I am going to let him direct me where the good is in this situation. And that's not easy. Then again, Jesus never said it would be. That's something to think about. Let us pray. Lord, when you sent your Son into this world, he taught, he healed, he did miracles, he built relationships, he showed us what it meant to be a child of God. And much of that work revolves around changing the narrative and reinterpreting the narrative and taking the negative that happens in our lives and forcing it to become positive. Letting you guide us toward the goodness in life. And yes, sometimes that means loving your enemy and caring for those who hate you and saying nice things about the people that curse you and turning the other cheek when you get slapped in one and walking that extra mile when somebody forces you into something that you don't want to do. You show us how to take power away from the world, that we can make it what you want it to be. A place filled with love, peace, hope, and joy. A place where all people know that they are loved by you and by everybody else. A place where nobody is left out. And for that, today we give you thanks. Watch over us in our endeavors as we ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. I hope you have an amazing week. We have, like I said, I think 1 or 2 more weeks of Epiphany. Lent begins in March, and we've got something new coming up for that. Check out the other videos that we posted today. If you want to see the backlog of sermons, you can go to the Mancelona United Methodist Church YouTube page, where they're all nice and organized into their own little playlists, so you don't even have to look for anything in particular. The message videos have tags, so if you're looking for something specific, try typing in some tags. You never know what you'll find. We hope you have a good week, and we'll see you next time.